Hello, my friends. Let's talk about America. In this long chat that I'm going to do here, I want to try to break down some of the reasons why people either hate America or love America. And I know that it's probably not really what you would consider the most proper English to say, love, in this context. The word love gets really kind of misused in a lot of ways. I was always raised and taught to use the word love with only within the context of things that could love you back. In this context, though, it's kind of a gray area because you could say that people love America, and America is made up of people, so they could love you back. But then you could also say it as a concept or kind of like just an abstract symbol, and that doesn't have the ability to love you back. But I'm just saying it in the most generic form here, and also in the possible context of the people of America, that you could certainly say that you could love America in that way. But there's definitely a lot of people who hate America. So we're going to talk about both. And I just want to focus here first about the negatives, or at least what people consider negatives for America and why they may hate America because of some of these things. Now, this was kind of a difficult thing to kind of outline in my mind because there's so many things we could talk about. I mean, we're talking like hundreds and hundreds of things that people hate about America, and hundreds, if not thousands of things that you could love about America. I found it a lot easier to do the positives than the negatives. Because for me personally, though, I see America more so than not as a good country. And I love America a lot more than I hate America. There are aspects of America that I don't like, but it's mainly confined to individual subjects and topics. It's not that America overall is just this horrible place. It's just little things that go on in America I don't like. So let's start with the negatives, and then we'll go to the positives. So I have five reasons that people either hate or love America. So one of the reasons that people hate America is because there's a lot of misunderstanding and brainwashing. It's almost like there's a psyop going on with people that believe that, socialism and anarchism is a better solution. It's a better society. It's a better social structure than capitalism. And then when you push them to give examples of why, they really have a very difficult time coming up with any concrete examples or any kind of logical conclusions of why it would be better. And they talk about inequality and all this, but what they're really upset with, in my opinion, what I see, is that people don't like crony capitalism. And that's what we see a lot of now. We don't see a lot of pure forms of capitalism like it used to be. We're seeing a lot of perverted forms of free markets. We're seeing subsidized and manipulated markets. And so the free market isn't so free anymore, right? And we see a lot of winners and losers, and it's been planned out to be like that. And that's not a free market. Capitalism is really based on, if you provide value to society, society will reward you for that. And then in turn of that reward, it reinforces you to do more. And then with all this innovation and striving and progress, we get to be even better and better as a society. We have more technology and more knowledge, and we continue to develop in a very good way. So capitalism, in its pure form, is brilliant. It's wonderful. It's how, a lot of these, countries in the world originally started. Like the U.S., we really got our feet off the ground because we were very pro-capitalism. And we still are. But there's a lot of perversion, though, and a lot of manipulation that really needs to end, because there's so much market manipulation that it stifles innovation, and the future of America is darker because of it. Another reason why people hate America is because they say that we have too many freedoms. Can you believe that? Too many freedoms. Now, I think a lot of this comes from the socialist ideology that we should be more like slaves. But literally, some people believe that we should be enslaved more by our governments. I just don't understand that. I do not understand that. Why would you think that it would be a good thing for other people to control you? So for me, though, I think there are a group of people, and I'm not saying all socialist or all anarchist, but I do believe that there's got to be a portion of these people that have literally mental illness, because there's no one in a healthy mind frame that's going to say, oh, please enslave me. Please give me less freedom. Another reason why people hate America, apparently, is because they don't like the sovereignty of the nation. But it really isn't just America. They don't like the sovereignty of any nations. They don't like closed borders. They don't like that we have laws. They don't like that we have order, and that people need to be responsible for their actions. They need to be accountable. And so what you see in particular is that there's this idea that anarchy would be better. But you look around the world and you see how rare it is, even on a community level, to find anarchists that thrive. It's almost unheard of. And when you really find these little communities spread around the world, they typically have a pretty strong socialist tinge, and they typically don't last very long. So this whole ideology is very skewed, and it's very imperfect. This idea that, oh, we need to have open borders, anybody should be able to come here, and we shouldn't have laws. It really is disturbing, because it goes back to the level of ignorance of some people. They do not understand how U.S. society works. And they don't understand how lucky they are to even live in the U.S. They don't even understand. They're just that close-minded and that ignorant. And so what's just even more jaw-dropping is to see some of these people thriving in America. And they don't even see that their success is mainly because of capitalism. They don't see it because they have a safe, city that they live in, or they don't see that the opportunities afforded to them are made possible by all their freedoms and by the rule of law. And so it is shocking how people believe things that are not based in reality. Another reason why people hate America is because under certain leadership, administrations in the past, evil has been done. And I will be the first to say that, of course. And that's how it is in every country. There's no perfect governance over time. There's always horrific things that have happened. The U.S. is really not exempt from this at all. There's all kinds of crimes against humanity, in my opinion, that have been committed by various administrations and various people in power in the U.S. historically. Wars, conflicts, assassinations, land grabs. And so certainly America has a conflicting history of not just good, but also evil. But I think that in the big picture, when you really look at it, there's a lot more good than evil. There's a lot more good than evil. And humans are not perfect. So you cannot blame the government, a free republic, as the cause of evil, because inherently people have an evil tendency and they do evil things. So it's the imperfect person. It's the imperfection of humanity because of how we are in our nature that contributes to our problems, not because the system isn't a good system. And so I want to close up the reasons why people hate America with this. America is one of the last holdouts of freedom, and it's a main resisting agent against the realization of the New World Order. This, unfortunately, though, is becoming less of a reality over time. More and more people are just accepting the groupthink that, oh, America is just bad and capitalism is horrible. Freedoms are bad. And so it's really concerning to see people hate America because they think that we are not globally united as we should. that, because we have sovereignty and that we're not wanting to be part of a new world order, we don't want to merge and give up our sovereignty, that we're this problem. It's very concerning, though, to see people want to relinquish their ability to self-govern in this pie in the sky ideology that, the whole world's going to reunite and everything's just going to be okay. Well, that's not how it works. The more power that gets centralized, the more dangerous it is for the citizen. And that's what's always been seen over history. You want to decentralize power as much as possible, and that actually guarantees the best odds for the most freedom to the citizens. So let's now jump to reasons why people love America. And this is my favorite part, obviously, in this video. This was actually quite easy for me to I had so many ideas, I couldn't really hardly limit it, but I just picked 5 of them that I really liked a lot. Of course, I had to start this out with freedoms and liberties. Obviously, the wonderful things that we can do. And even though there's a heavy hand of government in some locations in the U.S., there are still locations that you're, for the most part, just left alone. Like if you just want a quiet, peaceful life, there are still places out. Now, I'm not talking about just the desert or middle of the forest, but I mean, those are good places too. But there are some places that are just very libertarian in thinking. They're very conservative libertarian. And I just really like that, because that really goes back to the heart of the country. That goes back to the beginning of the individual being more self-reliant and the government being small and staying out of the way, and the government not trying to overreach its bounds, right? So it's a beautiful thing to see the republic, to see capitalism in play in its a pure form. And that does still happen, though, here in the U.S. It's not as common as it used to be, but it is. If you look, you can find societies, or I should say communities that actually practice this. The next thing that people love about America is that it's so pro-capitalism. And even though there's a lot of crony capitalism that goes on, there are still a ton of examples you can see all around you of real capitalism, of mom and pop stores, people opening up a business and thriving their whole life. I mean, just amazing things. Like, I can't tell you how many neighbors I have that have their own business or a side business. I mean, it's just amazing. I have an immediate neighbor that's right to the left of me that owns their own lawn care business, and they have like 35 yards they maintain. And they also have another job that they work, but this is definitely a job that they do a lot of. And they have, several commercial grade, lawnmowers and weed eaters, and they have a few trailers that they haul with their trucks, and they do a lot of work. And I mean, 35 yards doesn't sound like a lot, but for one family, that's a lot to keep up with. I mean, think about that. So, I mean, where else in the world are you going to see just the freedom to go about and do what you want to do? Yes, there are a few places still in the world that you can really, have a business and be successful at. I mean, you can still do that. But America is certainly one of those. And I think it's a real plus. Another reason that people love America is the safety and security. And, look at America on a map. We are surrounded on both sides with vast ocean water, and we have the most powerful military in the world. And I would believe that probably the best intelligence agencies in the world. We have the best satellite technology, to my knowledge. We have people all around the world that gather information in real time, all the time, 24/7, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. I mean, we have a pretty good system. And so it's still fairly rare to have any kind of terrorist activity in America. Mass shootings are actually a very rare occurrence, even though, the mainstream media acts like it happens every day. It doesn't, though. It's a very rare occurrence in real life. And it's just like a pretty safe place to live. Now, there are some cities, especially like places in the inner cities that are, very, very much struggling with issues of gang violence and stuff like that. So there are definitely some cities that have problems with violence and that have some high crime in the U.S. But there's like way more examples of places that have average to very low crime. Like in my area, for example, there's like almost no crime whatsoever. Like nothing goes on. I mean, that's why we don't even have police response at night. I mean, because it's so quiet and nothing goes on, we don't even have a third shift with the police department where I live. I mean, isn't that interesting? When I first learned about that, I was a bit concerned. I was like, well, who do I call if I have a problem? Well, they said, well, typically it never happens. We don't really have problems. But I did find out that you can call the sheriff. He's not close by, but it'll take like 30, 40 minutes to get here. But you could call the sheriff if you really needed help. But my local police department literally only has 2 shifts. And sometimes they only have 1 officer per shift. It's very interesting. So some areas are just relatively very peaceful and quiet and safe. I know some neighbors that don't even lock their doors. I mean, when I actually built my house years ago, the plumber, which lives even further off of the main road than I do in a pretty rural area, he says that he never locks his house. And when he was actually working on my plumbing, when my house was being built, he was telling me like, yeah, right now my house is unlocked and it doesn't bother him. He's never had a problem his whole life. And I mean, he was in his mid-50s. It's really amazing. So this idea that, America is dangerous or all that, well, it's only in certain places. In some places, there's just nothing going on. There's just nothing. I mean, I stopped monitoring the police scanner years ago because there was nothing on the police scanner. It would just be like no activity. If you ever heard anybody call dispatch, all the officer was doing was telling them that they were going on lunch break. And so it was so boring, I just stopped listening. So let's go to another example here. Another example of why people love America is that citizens are mostly caring and good people, and they're really friendly. And I'm not saying everybody is the best person here in America. There's a lot of people who live here, But overall, people are really friendly. Just like there's like a whole bunch of other countries that typically their people are just really friendly. So it's not like it's anything out of the norm, but there's a lot of people who say, Americans are really short with people and they're rude. And I mean, there are those people, but there's probably like 100 more people that are not like that. You see, for every person that is. So I just think overall people are good. And once again, the crime is very low in a lot of areas. And so you can find places that are very safe to live. And you can actually have some very, very low cost of living. And that's something else that people just don't really think about. When they think of America, they think of these really big cities, and it can be very expensive to live in these big cities. But all you have to do is go in the suburbs or even go a little bit outside the suburbs if you want the best deal. And you can get land super cheap. You can get houses that are like an eighth or more cheaper than living in the city. So, I mean, it's just amazing that if you really look, you can really get the cost of living down for you. I mean, there are some people that have figured out, how to live comfortable on just a very small part-time job because they just don't need that much money because there's not much overhead. Their cost of living is, and especially if you don't have any debt to service, then there's just not a real reason why you'd want to have a 40 to 60 hour week job because, well, heck, you only need so much to live comfortable. So why do more? So, I mean, of course, you could always work and make more money to save money, if you want to retire early. And that's what a lot of people do. But America actually gives you a full range of options. You don't have to live in the city and have really high cost of living. You can live other places and actually live very, very inexpensively. So I find it kind of funny that there's all these travel sites. I like to go on them sometimes just to kind of read things. But sometimes on these travel sites, you see what's the cheapest places to live in the world? And they give you these quotes of how much it would cost. But what's so hilarious is that there's places in the U.S. that I know that are actually cheaper than some of those so-called cheapest places to live in the world. And so sometimes you don't have to go to another country, to a place that you don't even know their language just to save a buck in your retirement. So you can just look around within the U.S. and you might be shocked of some places of what things cost. Some things are just insanely affordable. And of course, in the contrast, you can go and find places that are insanely expensive. So, I mean, there's a whole gamut there. But I also want to say, though, in mix of all this, not only is there a lot of options, but there's a lot of social safety nets in America. I mean, I know that there's a lot of other countries that do this as well. And I'm not trying to promote social welfare. I mean, I think we already have way more than we should. But for those people concerned about if something happens to you, America, there's so many tiers of social safety nets that it's almost impossible really to go hungry or to not have shelter. I mean, it's possible, but man, there's so many systems. Even where I live in a rural area, there's programs everywhere. If you want to take advantage of them, you can. And there's so many programs. I mean, food banks and I mean, you name it. I mean, there's shelters you can go if you just don't have a home, or there's Red Cross that can help you if your house burns down. I mean, there's all these things, even in my area, that's available. And of course, in larger cities, you have so much more. So let's now go to the last reason I think that would be good to mention of why people love America. And that is because we are one of the most technologically advanced civilizations in the world. So you could say that we're a very advanced nation. And I mean, it just depends on what technology sector that we're talking about. I'm not saying that, we're the best here in the US in every realm of tech, because that wouldn't be true probably. But we are really good with our engineers and just everybody. We understand how things work. And a lot of that is because we have a pretty good educational system. Now, I think there's a lot of problems with the education system overall, but it still is a lot better than most. My problem with it is just that there's a lot of socialist type of teaching and influence in the curriculums, and that's the problem. But that kind of influences how things are taught. But overall, though, if you're just an individual, in particular an adult, and you want to learn something, there's an abundant educational opportunities abound. And we're talking everywhere. I mean, you can get grants, you can get loans if you had to, you can get all kinds of things. But there's really no excuses not to be educated. In a lot of cases, you can just learn what you need to learn if you don't need an actual certificate or degree. You can just learn what you want to learn over the internet. And if that's not good enough, then, there's all kinds of libraries across this country. We have so much of a network when it comes to education that, I mean, if you look, you will find. And that's how it is here in America. I mean, we have resources on top of resources. The part that kind of upsets me the most, though, about all that is that so many people here in America, they don't choose to take advantage of all these resources. It just goes unused. Like the bulk of it just goes unused. And I mean, of course, there's a lot of people I don't believe that should go to college or university. Maybe, a trade school would be a lot better. But then there's also like some people that later in life, they want to change careers and stuff. And then they choose not to because they're like, well, I just don't want to learn anything new. When in some cases, their own company would pay for their new education. So there's a lot of times it's the individual that's really the problem, and not so much that, society is not giving you opportunities. No, I mean, society gives you an abundant opportunities. I mean, if anything, it's almost overkill. And another issue that I have a problem with, and I think a lot of people do, even people that are so-called quote unquote minorities see this, and it's actually kind of embarrassing to a lot of minorities, at least those that I've talked to over the years, is how that a lot of like the universities and colleges cater toward, minority populations as if they're not able to do things on their own. So they have to have all this extra help. I mean, look at how it really is on a lot of levels racist. How certain groups of people have so many more scholarships and opportunities than others. So like I'm a white guy, and I mean, when I went to college and I went to state universities, I was actually limited to just like one type of student loan, type of grant. And that was it. It was a federal grant, student loan. And other people, though, in my class that happened to be of more of a minority type of background had an abundant number. I mean, they were telling me they had 3. One person said they had 5 options to pick from. And here I had only 1. And it was because of my skin color, which is just really wrong. And America is not built on that principle. America is about, everybody is supposed to be equal in the eyes of the law and in the eyes of society. But that's not how it is. That there's a lot of people like myself that if you are white, then you will be profiled and you will basically have less opportunities. And it's just incredible. It's incredible because back in the day, it used to be the opposite, and it's now like reverse discrimination. And so what we're seeing is America is like thinking that they're trying to make up for the past. And yes, slavery was horrible. It's completely wrong. But it was also not something that was like endemic to the whole population. It was not like the majority of people in the U.S. had slaves, and it wasn't like that at all. In fact, it was mainly confined to certain regions, certain plantations for certain crops. Mostly, I would imagine, is probably for cotton and stuff. But it's just incredible, though, that there's this so-called guilt for all this slavery when I never had anything to do with it. My parents had nothing to do with it. My grandparents and even my great-grandparents had nothing to do with the slavery. We have no connection to it. And our generations weren't even really in sync. At least the last few generations in my family had nothing to do with it because slavery was already outlawed. So it's almost like this multi-generational guilt that was been put upon certain population groups that were supposed to be guilty for things that we didn't do. Like, seriously? And then we're going to be like, you see, it's almost like, okay, so then that gives, certain groups the right to discriminate against other people, especially if you're like white, because, you're the majority, So this is where we're at. There's a lot of ignorance and there's a lot of twisted ideology that I call it's just a perversion of the truth. And, I can understand how people could be so confused and, backwards because there's such a push. There's such a brainwashing going on by all kinds of people, especially educators, once again. So I think that for society to, especially here in the U.S., to actually get back to their roots and to stabilize, we're going to have to go back to real capitalism. We're going to have to go back to being a real republic and not a banana republic. And we're going to have to really realize what it is to have real family again and have a mother and a father, as part of a family and not just mothers, single mothers raising their kids and no father around. So I think that we also need to kind of focus on education too, that you need to have a skill or trade. I think that's very important. And I think all this dependency on social welfare is only done very bad things, just like all this dependency on stimulus monies and bailouts, market manipulations. I mean, you can subsidize things for only so long and then you crash economies. And I think that's where we're headed, because it certainly is influencing inflation. The dollar is weaker over time, just the buying power of things. I mean, there's truly inflation. Now, some people say, well, the dollar index looks okay. Yeah, but that's not accounting for the true, inflation that the citizen undergoes every year, that hidden tax every year that we undergo. And so it's disgusting to see how the currency is being watered down over time. And of course, we know that over time, what they're going to do is continue to take out more of the physical currency and just replace this whole system in the great economic reset with a digital currency. We know this. I mean, they're public about it. This is not even debatable. I don't know when this is going to happen. It could be in the next couple of years. We'll transition over to like the Fed coin or some kind of federal digital currency. It could be 5-10 years from now. I mean, I don't know how long the transition will be, but it does seem like when you read the white papers, from the globalists, that a lot of things are going to happen between now and in 2025. That there's this window of the next 4 to 5 years that a lot is going to be changing. That they're going to try to reset, especially economies, because really economies in nation states are having a hard time even basically maintaining their debt. They're having a hard time just maintaining the payments of just the interest on their debt. So if you can't service your debt, then you're going to have foreclosures, and they're trying to avoid a global economic crash of like historic epic proportions. So what you're seeing right now is a transition to debt forgiveness, a merging of sovereignty, this idea of, okay, well, we're going to, retract or reclaim, what's he call that? It's more like we're going to basically like take back, let's just say that. We're going to take back the currency and reissue a new one. But it looks like more and more there won't be a physical currency to replace our currency, but a digital currency. So they're going to recall our currency at some point. And so that's pretty spooky if you ask me, because when they do that, we will have so much less privacy. You won't even be able to go to a yard sale or a flea market or buy something from a neighbor without having to swipe phones with each other, because that's how you're going to swipe money from account to account digitally. There won't be any kind of physical currency. Now, some people say, "Oh, that would never happen," but it's all in the works. The globalists have been talking about this for years. So that's about all that I want to talk about here today. So I hope these reasons help you understand at least a little bit, at least from my viewpoint, about some of the things that people think about or could be thinking about when they talk about why we hate or love America. America, though, for me personally, is an amazing place, full of opportunity. And I really don't want to see this last beacon of hope and freedom, snuffed out. But it does seem like for a lot of people, that's what should happen, that we should reset the republic and we should go and merge into something totally different, something that would be catastrophic, really, and it would not be based on freedoms. And so some people really are worshiping the wrong, the wrong being, if you will. They're not worshiping God. They're definitely, it seems like there's a lot of evil forces at play. And so I think the better that we can focus on what is important and what is good and right, the more that we can promote that. And so I think we need to have a conscious image of how we should be so that we can actually be that. Because instead of worrying about all the things that the other side is trying to do to destroy America, if we focus on all the things that we need to be doing to maintain America, it makes it that much more difficult for it to be destroyed. You guys take care. Thanks for checking the video out. Catch you later.